French colonial history is a complex and multifaceted narrative that stretches across centuries, continents, and cultures. The French Empire, at its zenith, was one of the largest empires in history, influencing the political, social, and economic landscapes of regions from North America to Southeast Asia, and from the Caribbean to Africa. The story of French colonialism is not just about the expansion of territory but also about the spread of ideas, the clash of cultures, and the profound impact on both the colonized and the colonizers. The roots of French colonialism can be traced back to the early 16th century, during the Age of Exploration. France, like other European powers, was driven by the desire for wealth, trade, and the spread of Christianity. Early French explorers, such as Jacques Cartier, ventured to the New World, laying the foundation for French claims in North America. By the early 17th century, France had established its first permanent settlement in Quebec, marking the beginning of New France. This vast territory, stretching from the Gulf of St. Lawrence to the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi River, became a critical part of France's colonial ambitions. New France was primarily focused on the fur trade, and the French developed close relations with Native American tribes, which were crucial for the success of their colonial endeavors. While New France was the centerpiece of early French colonialism, the Caribbean and West Africa also became focal points for French expansion. The Caribbean islands, particularly Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, Guadeloupe, and Martinique, were transformed into sugar plantations that relied heavily on the brutal transatlantic slave trade. French colonial rule in these islands was marked by the harsh exploitation of enslaved Africans, who were subjected to grueling labor under inhumane conditions. The wealth generated from these colonies contributed significantly to France's economy, but it also sowed the seeds of resistance and rebellion. The Haitian Revolution, 1791–1804, led by enslaved Africans, became the first successful slave revolt in history and resulted in the establishment of Haiti as the first black republic, dealing a severe blow to French colonial ambitions in the Caribbean. In Africa, French colonialism took on a different character. Starting in the 17th century, France established trading posts along the West African coast, such as Gorée Island and St. Louis. These outposts were initially focused on the slave trade, but over time, they expanded into larger colonial territories. The scramble for Africa in the late 19th century saw France aggressively expand its holdings, leading to the establishment of French West Africa and French Equatorial Africa, encompassing vast territories from the Sahara Desert to the Congo Basin. French colonial policy in Africa was characterized by the civilizing mission, a paternalistic belief that it was France's duty to bring civilization, culture, and Christianity to what they considered backward societies. This policy led to the imposition of French language, culture, and education on the colonized populations, often at the expense of indigenous traditions and identities. Southeast Asia also became a significant theater for French colonialism. In the mid-19th century, France began its conquest of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, which collectively became known as French Indochina. The colonization of Indochina was driven by both strategic and economic interests, as France sought to counter British influence in Asia and exploit the region's resources, particularly rubber and rice. French rule in Indochina was marked by a rigid and exploitative economic system, with local populations subjected to heavy taxation and forced labor. The imposition of French culture and education in Indochina created a westernized elite, but it also fueled nationalist sentiments that would later contribute to the struggle for independence. French colonial rule was not without resistance. Throughout the empire, colonized peoples resisted French domination in various forms, from armed uprisings to cultural and political movements. In Algeria, one of France's most prized colonies, resistance was particularly fierce. The French conquest of Algeria began in 1830 and was marked by brutal military campaigns and the displacement of local populations. Over time, Algeria became an integral part of France, with a significant number of French settlers, known as Pieds Noirs, establishing themselves in the colony. However, the indigenous Algerians were subjected to a harsh regime of repression, discrimination, and economic exploitation. The struggle for independence culminated in the Algerian War, 1954–1962, a bloody and protracted conflict that ultimately led to Algeria's independence and marked the beginning of the end for the French colonial empire. The decline of French colonialism accelerated after World War II, as nationalist movements gained momentum across the empire. The war had weakened France economically and politically, making it difficult to maintain control over its colonies. In Indochina, the struggle for independence led by the Viet Minh culminated in the First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954, which ended with the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu and the eventual withdrawal of French forces from Vietnam. In Africa, the decolonization process was relatively more peaceful, with many French colonies gaining independence in the 1960s through negotiations and referendums. However, the legacy of French colonialism continued to shape the post-colonial world, particularly in the form of neo-colonial relationships, where former colonies remained economically dependent on France. One of the most enduring aspects of French colonial history is its cultural legacy. The French language, legal systems, and educational models were implanted across the empire and continue to influence many former colonies today. Francophonie, the community of French-speaking nations, is a direct result of this colonial legacy, with countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia maintaining French as an official language. The concept of assimilation, where colonized peoples were encouraged to adopt French culture and values, was a cornerstone of French colonial policy. However, this policy often led to cultural erasure and a loss of indigenous identities, creating a complex and sometimes contradictory legacy. French colonial history also raises important questions about the ethics and consequences of imperialism. The economic exploitation, cultural domination, and social inequalities that characterized French colonial rule have left deep scars in many former colonies. The legacy of colonialism is still felt today in issues such as economic underdevelopment, political instability, and social divisions in many parts of the world. At the same time, the experience of colonialism has also led to rich cultural exchanges, the blending of traditions, and the creation of new identities. In recent years, there has been a growing movement in France and its former colonies to confront and reassess the legacy of colonialism. This has included debates over the restitution of cultural artifacts taken during the colonial period, the acknowledgement of colonial crimes, and the recognition of the contributions of colonized peoples to French history. The process of coming to terms with this past is complex and ongoing, as both France and its former colonies navigate the intertwined legacies of colonialism and post-colonialism. French colonial history is a story of power, ambition, resistance, and resilience. It is a history that has shaped the modern world in profound ways, influencing global politics, economics, and culture. As we continue to grapple with the legacy of colonialism, understanding the history of the French Empire is essential to understanding the present and envisioning a future where the lessons of the past inform a more just and equitable world. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos.